Instead of TV, the one you take to bed with you.
Hello, my name's Peter Laws and welcome to The Flicks the Church Forgot. This is the show that explores or tries to explore the deeper and sometimes spiritual themes of horror. Now tonight I'm going to be taking an in-depth look at Arrow Video's loaded new Blu-ray release of David Cronenberg's fascinating and actually potentially divisive film Videodrome from 1983. Now, I was 8.5 when Videodrome was first released in the UK, and so I guess I'm old enough to remember how the word video was, for a time, a sort of pop culture signifier of the future. I remember that kids' TV shows that wanted to sound contemporary would shoehorn the video idea into everything, like this example of a UK TV show from 1984, which I remember quite vividly, called Fast Forward.
Watch me on the video. Hold on, please, as long as you please. Remote controls, taping rolls, a mad mash on forward march. Watch me on the video. Watch me on the video.
Video was the symbol of cutting-edge technology, and the idea was that consumer culture was moving into a new tech-savvy age, and it was used as a sign of bristling positivity of the young and all that sort of stuff. And it wasn't just home video either, but satellite TV and fiber optic technology and microprocessors. They all seem to be heralding the dawn of a new communications era. But not everybody was so keen on this idea and these new developments. Like any new technology, some people were concerned about the darker potential of these things. There were a few people who were academically cautious about what these new developments might do to society and the fabric of how people interact with one another, but there were others, on the other hand, who saw home video in particular as a sign of potential moral Armageddon, particularly when it came to the ban the sadist video nasty scandal of the early 80s, which carried on into the 90s. If you want my exploration of the video nasties panic and some reviews of some key titles, you can check out episodes 46 to 52 of my audio podcast when I did a short season on the video nasties panic. But basically, getting back to Videodrome, I'm saying that in the early 1980s, you had the excitement and the positivity of this new medium, but there was also like ideological fears about its power and its influence. And into this climate comes, in my mind, the perfect combination of these two opposing points of view: David Cronenberg's Videodrome.
Now, from the creator of Scanners.
Come to me.
Videodrome.
Videodrome. It bites.
Videodrome.
What are you waiting for, lover? You're going insane. It turns me on. Videodrome. Videodrome.
Videodrome is very realistic.
First, it controls your mind. Then, it destroys your body. Deborah Harry, James Woods.
You let me watch?
Videodrome. A terrifying new weapon.
Now, Cronenberg is one of my favorite horror directors, and what I do like about him and what I love about him is that his films can be very ambiguous in how they're understood. For example, his brilliant first feature, Shivers, a controversial film, also known as They Came From Within in the US, that can be read as a warning about the chaos of sexual promiscuity, or it can even be seen as a rallying cry for sexual liberation, and the film works as either of those things, or even can work as both of those things somehow at the same time. Equally, one person could sit and watch Videodrome and say that it's a cutting critique on the negative power of new communications technology, but you could equally read, I think, Videodrome as a celebration of how new technology can help us to find new ways to interact, new ways to be human, albeit in a sort of terrifying fashion. Now, it's the story of Max Wren, who's played by James Woods, who plays the owner of a cable channel, called Civic TV in Toronto, and he's working in this early 80s climate where home entertainment is expanding, the video and satellite industry is growing, and people are getting more and more content hungry, and so he's looking for some sort of programming that's going to stand out and grip the viewer. And in the film, he views potential shows for his channel, from Japanese soft porn to Caligula-style eroticism, but all of it feels yawn-inducing and outdated. It lacks the sort of hard edge that he's looking for, something to stand out from the crowd. Then a pirate satellite dish operator stumbles on a show called Videodrome that seems to be being broadcast from Malaysia. And when Max sees this sort of illicit broadcast, he's transfixed. It's exactly the sort of future entertainment he's looking for, even though, ironically, this future entertainment is an ancient form of entertainment. It's little more than watching somebody being tortured. Basically, they have a clay room where masked men torture and murder. Well, I think it's all women from what I can remember. So anyway, he sees this snuff TV, or rather this simulated snuff TV, and he thinks, right, this looks like the sort of thing that would stand out from the crowd. I'll get this, I want this. But the more he watches Videodrome, the more he's exposed to its signal, the more the line between reality and what he sees on the screen starts to blur. Now, it's difficult to talk about Videodrome without talking really deeply about what goes on in the film, and so if you haven't seen the film yet, I suggest you stop listening now, or stop watching now, and you go and watch the film yourself, because I don't want to spoil any of the grim delights of the film, but I'm assuming that you've watched it already. And so let's dive into the heart of Videodrome and discuss some of the things that go on there, as well as checking out Arrow's special new release of the film on Blu-ray, because it really is quite an impressive release that they've put together. It's really good. Now, Cronenberg sometimes makes divisive films, and sometimes he makes widely embraced films. For example, Cronenberg's Scanners. Now, that works both as a popcorn action movie and a science fiction think piece, and it pretty much pleased most audiences. His remake of The Fly equally delighted critics, but really made an impact with horror and mainstream audiences. His version of Stephen King's The Dead Zone is similar in that sense. I think I would say definitely that's his most mainstream horror film that I can think of. But he also makes a lot of divisive films, in the sense that some people love them and others just completely do not get them at all, and even might hate them. And I think Videodrome is one of those films that some see as near genius and others see as incoherent pretentiousness, with some scenes of nudity, violence, and gore, which do certainly push the boundaries of taste, I guess. And so for some people, it's very off-putting. Now, I'm one of the former people who thinks I think Videodrome's a really good film. I think it's great. But I'm not surprised it turned off many audiences because of its challenging subject matter, but also because it's unashamedly intellectual, in the sense that it's just revealing, it's revealing social and psychological pondering, and will sacrifice constant logic to keep doing it. Now, the film's got great critical reviews when it was first released, but it had a disastrous run at the box office, with lots of audiences basically saying it was either plain sick or just largely nonsensical. Yet, in an ironic twist, the film gathered way more traction in its natural home, and that was home video, to the extent that now it's considered as a modern horror classic and a powerful work of thoughtful and disturbing cinema. Now, Arrow Video certainly seem to think so, because they've plowed a lot of love, care, and attention into this new release, and you can see that they view it as an important film, because it is an important film in terms of in terms of horror. Now, once Max starts viewing the Videodrome signal more and more, he starts to develop these frightening hallucinations where the lines between what's organic and what's mechanical starts to break down. So he sees his TV and it develops veins and moans and it pulsates. Videotapes breathe and groan as if they're alive. In one of the extras, incidentally, on the Arrow disc, one of the crew explains why they picked Betamax format in the film, because they assumed that would be the future. How wrong were they? But also that a Betamax tape was small enough to fit into the quivering slit that opens up in Max's belly as he sits watching Videodrome. Oh yeah, I haven't mentioned that yet, have I? Yeah, that bit, that basically Max gradually starts to develop a sort of vulva-like gash in its stomach, which starts working as a sort of storage system for external objects. Now, this storage slit moment, and there's a few of them, might well add some surreal gore to the film, but this stuff is not just included there to shock. Cronenberg is a visual thinker, and so these sorts of images in his work usually have some sort of concept lying beneath them. And for me, the stomach slit idea is a very clear symbol of one of the central themes of the film, and that is that Max, in his obsession for more TV content, is slowly becoming like a human VCR. The medium of television and video is providing him with a way of looking at the world, but it's more than just entertainment. The ideas in these programs are entering into him, and they are being absorbed by his body, and they are becoming part of him. So that all it takes is someone to slip a new breathing flesh tape right into his stomach, and he becomes subservient to whatever message is on that tape. At one point, a character called Marsha points out to Max that the danger of Videodrome, this snuff TV signal that he's watching, the danger is that it has a philosophy, her exact words. And as the film progresses, it's clear that Videodrome doesn't just have a philosophy, but it's evangelical about this philosophy. It wants to get this philosophy into the mind of the viewer. And in this case, it wants to get it into Max Wren. And I mean, it wants to get this philosophy into Max Wren. Just as an aside, by the way, Marsha's this aging female pornographer, and she's a great character. She looks a little bit like Reggie Nalder, the actor who played Mr. Barlow in Salem's Lot, and Veit Schmidt in Zoltan Hand of Dracula, which I guess isn't really a compliment. But I like her character because it's like she's almost sad and nostalgic about the good old days of just plain pornography, and she's distressed by the weirdness the world is bringing out, which I think makes for an interesting character, that she's pining for the good old days of straight up pornography and exploitation. But anyway, getting back to my point, you have to only look at our own lives and our own relationship with the media to spot that this human VCR idea isn't that far from the truth. The idea is that we are played by the media. How many of us aren't sure what to think about a certain subject, and so we view someone we respect and admire on the screen or on the internet or in a newspaper or online or wherever, and we sort of absorb their opinions or the things that they talk about, and we end up losing track of where our ideas come from, because they get fleshed together until we assume that the ideas we have are our own, but we've assimilated them from all these different places. So, somebody asks us, what do you think about a certain subject? And we reel off our own thoughts without even realizing that what we're doing is recycling things that other people have said, but we've absorbed them and they've become us. And there's the idea that that people on TV themselves are the same. They're just products of TV like we are. They're products of the media as well. When you see this really well displayed in the film with the character Brian Oblivion, a character in this who will only appear on TV. By that I mean there's a chat show scene, for example, when he's wheeled on to take part in the chat show, but he's on a television set, and we never see him in the flesh, as it were, because the flesh doesn't matter anymore. The old flesh is irrelevant now. Long live the new flesh. This is the message of the film. He's got some brilliant lines, Brian Oblivion. Later he says that the television is part of the physical body. Television is reality, and reality is less than television. The power of the media to shape public reality and thought is, of course, nothing new, and it's been around since like caveman scraped pictures on the walls of their caves. But it's in the new communication climate of the 1980s when the reach and authority of these influences was being democratized in a way. It wasn't just a few establishment TV channels putting out a philosophy. With cable TV and video, more and more messages, sometimes subversive messages, anti-authoritative messages, were appearing out there, influencing others. And of course, this is all just a shadow prophecy of what would come later with the internet, which is pretty much a sort of Wild West of worldviews. Now, what I like about Cronenberg is, like I said, he doesn't necessarily condemn this idea of influence. He doesn't necessarily put it down. He just sort of observes and presents it. And there's no sense that he's looking down on any of the characters in the film. I didn't feel that anyway. For example, the singer Deborah Harry plays a talk show host in this called Nikki Brand, who gets to know Max, and we quickly discover that she's got some pretty unorthodox tastes. She likes physical pain, and she lets other guys like slice her shoulder, stick needles through her earlobes, and she even stubs a cigarette out on her chest at one point. Now, for some more traditional types and for the established TV channels at the time, she'd have represented all that is twisted and sick about modern society. But in the world of Videodrome, she's sympathetic and she's interesting, and also I think quite believable. And when she learns of the torture world of Videodrome, the show, she says, I was made for that show. It's like she finds a place, finally, and she sets herself about getting a place on it. It's like one of the positives of this growing exposure to all these different worldviews is that everybody starts to find something they can relate to. Though in this case, it doesn't really work out so well. But, I like that principle. Now, despite her plans, Deborah Harry's acting, who plays Nikki Brand, didn't really go anywhere after this, from what I know, which I think is unfortunate, because I think she does a very good job in this. She plays a complex and intriguing character. Carrying the film, though, is, of course, James Woods, who plays brilliantly plays Max Wren. Now, again, it'd be easy to view him as someone who's twisted and perverse. He's excited by the potential of snuff TV. He delights in viewing people tortured and murdered on the screen. Yet I don't think you get the sense from him, at least at first, that he wants the death on screen to be real. He's like most horror fans that I know, like me. Like he might be fascinated by the shocking imagery on the screen, but he's not a psychopath. He doesn't want to really hurt anybody. In fact, he makes pains to say at the beginning of the film that he sees violence on the screen as a potentially good thing for society because it will prevent people doing it in real life. It'll potentially satisfy dangerous tastes on screen rather than off. But the signal of Videodrome even starts to twist that part of his personality, and we can't work out where he's coming from at some point. There's a boyish innocence to Max Wren as well, which Woods puts across perfectly. He wants something harder in entertainment, but when he finally sees it, he is a bit twitchy about it. In one vision, for example, in the film, he finds himself in the Videodrome clay dungeon, and he's whipping a TV with Nikki Brand's image on it. But watch his face in that scene. He looks really awkward and nervous about it, and he does it, and he almost chuckles at the thought of oh my gosh, what am I doing here? And by the end of the film, we see his bravado and his exploitation spirit pressed right back down to the boyishness again. One of my favorite moments of his acting happens at the very end when he's having this conversation with Nikki about what the future holds for him now that his world has effectively fallen apart, his real life world at least. And you just listen to the tone of his voice, the way he talks to her. He's like a little boy. He's unsure where he's ended up and what he's going to. He sounds scared and lost. And you realize that he really has just been a blank canvas for the powerful around him to paint on and get them to do their bidding. In fact, when you look back over Max, he's a very gullible and easily led character. I can't help but think that Cronenberg wants to emphasize this in a scene which I'd never noticed before until I saw it on the Arrow disc, which is when Max is in the street and he's talking to a homeless guy, and he's just done something quite despicable, and he's standing talking to this homeless guy in the street, and the homeless man has this TV with him that's battery powered. Presumably he's a recipient of the cathode ray mission, which appears in the film, a homeless charity that rehabilitates the homeless with one simple method: basically give them access to TV. That will sort out the homeless problem. It's an amazingly interesting and crazy symbolism there. But anyway, as the homeless man's talking to Max, there's a picture of Max on the TV screen as the police are hunting him down for this heinous crime he's just done. And throughout it, the homeless guy keeps talking about his performing monkey. And while we see Max's smiling face on the TV, that message to me is that Max has become the performing monkey. He's naive, he's experience hungry, his personality's opened him up to any passing philosophy, and how easily he becomes their puppet, their performer, the human video player in which the powerful play their chosen program, and how easy all of us can do that. And what brought him in was the power of video. I think that's got interesting parallels, I think, with our current climate of worries about radicalization for religious terrorism. You know, there's all sorts of religious terrorism. I think it is naive to think that when we say terrorism, the only thing could be is Islam, right? If you live in the UK and you're aware of the history of Northern Ireland, you know full well that terrorists can warp Christianity too into violence, just like the minority of believers might do in Islam. But related to Videodrome, it's interesting, I think, to note that it's been reported, I read a news report one time, that one of the key recruiting techniques of Islamic State is the fact that they make very good videos. Their online recruitment content is glossy, it's well shot, it's put together with some artistic flair, and that appeals to young people as something credible. I guess the point I'm trying to make is the power of video continues to shape the philosophy of the viewers and can inspire them to do things that perhaps they wouldn't have done before. It makes me feel like Videodrome in a sense is even more prevalent today, where everybody's got access to all sorts of different ideas, wild ideas, and like in the video I discussed in my review of Mark of the Devil, I spoke about a YouTube video that I was watching where a man was denouncing Beyonce as a witch, and there was a stream of comments underneath saying she was like that, she was a witch. And at one point, Brian Oblivion says in Videodrome, "One day we will all have our own special names that will cause the cathode ray tube to resonate." And I think in this YouTube age, that's true. You know, of course, my special name is the Flicks the Church Forgot, and you are watching me trying to shape your beliefs right now, and I'm trying to shape your beliefs right now. Anyway, getting back to the film itself, it's a fascinating film with some inventive, disturbing imagery. The lighting's really impressive in it, and the score by Howard Shore is fantastic. I know that most people are fans of Howard Shore because of his Lord of the Rings music, but, you know, I'm not really that into fantasy and Lord of the Rings stuff, so I find his work that he did for the early Cronenberg stuff a little bit more exciting and interesting, my sort of taste. Particularly Dead Ringers and The Brood. Anyway, his score here is mournful and sounds like a requiem and a sort of funeral music for the death of the old flesh, you know, if you want to really be pretentious about it, but that music feels like that. Anyway, it's not a perfect film, and I think watching it back, I suppose you could have some criticisms here and there. I guess, for example, the ending. I like the ending, and it makes a lot of thematic sense, but it does feel a bit sudden and maybe not as spectacular as you might have imagined. However, there's a reading of this ending by Tim Lucas, I think he's called. Yeah, Tim Lucas, the Video Watchdog guy, and he does a commentary here, and he says something that makes great sense. In the commentary, he says that the film, in his view, is a cyclical film. It like goes in a cycle, and so in a sense that at the end, when we have the "Long Live the New Flesh" scene, the natural next scene to follow on from that is the first scene of the movie, where Max is waking up again in the bed at the very start, getting his video wake-up call. His idea is basically that Videodrome is like a nightmarish Groundhog Day with Max Wren stuck in the constant eternal loop of Videodrome. I think that's amazing. That's an amazing idea. I think it really is coherent too. It really makes me think about the film in a slightly different way. Is it my favorite Cronenberg film? No. It's one of my favorites, but I still think my personal favorite is The Brood, which I just personally find thematically rich, suspenseful, and freaky. I do love The Brood. But still, Videodrome is a great example of thought-provoking horror, and it makes you ponder all sorts of things, including spiritual ideas. For example, there's a really good line from Nikki Brand near the end where she says to a frightened, boyish Max, she says, "Don't be afraid to let your body die." And I mean, what a profound thing to say for so many of us. Our body is everything, and without our body, we are absolutely nothing, and we can't have any sort of consciousness, we feel, beyond the physical, vehicle that we walk around in. But Videodrome and Nikki Brand says that's not actually true. There's something beyond the flesh. There's the new flesh that can live on even after a body dies. In fact, at one point, she even describes Max as the video word made flesh, like his source was video, and he'll return to that source. You know, replace the word video with God, and you've got a similar sort of vibe in Christianity. There was a Christian song, by the way, I remember hearing when I first started going to church by a band called Switchfoot, I think they're called, and that was talking about what it meant to become a Christian. And I remember this song was saying, it was called A New Way to Be Human. I don't think they were really singing about Videodrome, but that's what I think about when I watch Videodrome, that it presents a similar idea, a new way of being that seems terrifying and baffling, and yet there's something in Max and something in us, the viewers, that says, maybe we are meant for something more than just flesh and blood. Maybe there is a new flesh coming, and long may it live. I like that idea. People imagine heaven, for example, as being either a figment of our imaginations or as a place like of wispy spirits playing away on harps, all that sort of stuff. But the Bible really talks about more like people being in glorified, resurrected bodies that are the same but different and better. Like the land beyond death won't be a place of spectral mistiness, but of physical, tangible, new flesh. Who knows? That's the sort of stuff I was pondering anyway after I switched the disc off. But anyway, the film itself's great. But what about Arrow's presentation of it? Well, it's excellent. I think they've done a great job with this. This is certainly the best I've ever seen Videodrome look. Though if you've already got the there's a Criterion, an American Criterion Blu-ray for this. I've read that this is a similar transfer to that. But it looks very sharp and detailed, and the sound's crisp. It's really clear. In fact, the high definition print is so good at times that there's moments when Rick Baker's special effects suffer because of the added scrutiny of high definition. For example, when Max has his hand trapped in his stomach and he stands up from the couch, his false arm already looks way too skinny, but here the color of his forearm really does not match his body and it looks very fake. It's not a big deal, it didn't bother me really. And to be honest, probably most or all of the other special effects were great. Anyway, Arrow releases this as a 2-disc set, and the first disc is all Videodrome goodness, with a film and a whole bunch of extras, and some of them are ported over from the Criterion disc, but some are fresh and exclusive to this release. Like, namely, I think some really interesting Talking Heads interviews. That's the new material. I especially enjoyed an interview with Dennis Etchinson, I think he's called. Etchinson, yeah, who wrote the novelization of Videodrome, and he wrote along some other novelizations of Carpenter movies like The Fog and Halloween 2 and 3. Now, horror novelizations are always cool, little curios. I like those things, and it's great and fun to hear an opinion from an author of them. Putting out an extra on him, I think, was really inspired. I never would have thought to do that. That was cool. But the other 2 interviews are equally fascinating. By the way, it's worth as a quick aside to point out that when Arrow first started out, the production quality on some of their extras, frankly, I really liked the content, but the production quality left a lot to be desired. And I remember watching, interviews with Dario Argento, for example, and it felt like an 80s home movie with no dedicated sound recording. But these days, Arrow really have got that part down pat. So the quality of these new interviews, not just the content, but the actual presentation of it is really pleasing. What I also like, though, is that they bung up a whole bunch of other bonus features in too. And one of my favorites that they put on here is a roundtable discussion about horror hosted by Mick Garris, where David Cronenberg and John Carpenter and John Landis chat about horror. Now, I've seen this before, and it's been on YouTube for ages, but there is something magical about it. I love this, where you get Cronenberg and Carpenter in particular, and they're right in the midst of filming Videodrome and The Thing. It's like a moment in time. And they make some really interesting comments on horror. Now, John Landis is there, and he crops up in a lot of iconic horror director-type circles and the masters of horror and stuff. And I like his enthusiasm about horror, about monster movies particularly. But to me, he's like a comedy director rather than horror. And while I like American Werewolf, and I think it has its scary moments, I don't think just one horror film makes you a master of horror. Maybe that's a controversial thing to say, I don't know. But anyway, the other 2, though, they are horror superstars, really, and I loved seeing and hearing them at such an interesting stage of their career. It feels like a little moment in time. The thought that after that meeting they were going back to edit The Thing or the Videodrome is just brilliant. Anyway, what's even more great about this disc as well is that the added value that the release comes with an entire second disc of early David Cronenberg films like Transfer, From the Drain, Stereo, and Crimes of the Future. These were all filmed between 66 and 70. Now, these films do give a really good insight into Cronenberg and how his style would develop, but particularly Stereo and Crimes of the Future are the ones to watch for that. And both of them are about an hour, just over an hour long each. And we start getting a real sense of Cronenberg's obsession with psychiatry and the impersonal corporations and medical experiments. And also, one of the things I love about him is his beautiful use of Canadian architecture. Now, the first two short films are fun, and you can spot some Cronenberg ideas in it, but really it's the longer two that are going to give you this sense of a real movie-making talent at work. Plus, they star... Hello, I'm Ronald Merrick, the actor from Shivers, played by Ronald Molodzik. I think that's how you say his name, Molodzik. Anyway, he was a criminally underused actor in Hollywood, but he crops up in a bunch of David Cronenberg films at the beginning of his career. Kim Newman also crops up in this, doing a commentary on these, so that's really cool. Anyway, having this extra disc is really great value, and I'm actually surprised that Arrow have presented it this way, because there's almost like 3 hours of material here, and it's not directly related to Videodrome. So I wonder why they didn't just put this out as a single disc, as it on its own. I think there's enough material there to warrant it standing on its own merits. But hey, the decision to bundle them together just makes it great value for the consumer. So if you're a fan of Videodrome, you're going to get some extra interesting stuff too. So anyway, on the whole, Arrow's new release of Videodrome comes very highly recommended, and not only because it's the very generous bonus material, but also because of the film itself and the excellent presentation. Videodrome may well have confused and annoyed some viewers when it first came out. Roger Ebert said it has got to be one of the least entertaining films of all time. But home video saved Videodrome, and today Videodrome is still finding its audience in its most appropriate setting, in the flickering screens of millions of homes where the prophecies of the 1980s really have come true. Well, that's it for the flicks the church forgot. Do remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel. That'd be cool. I'd appreciate it if you did that. And check out my other reviews as well. But remember, there's also a whole lot more reviews on my audio podcast, which you can find through my website. Also, please follow me on Twitter at Rev Peter Laws. But until then, remember to take everything I have said to you and place it deep into your psyche, preferably through your stomach slit, and absorb the constant repeating mantra. Long live the flicks the church forgot.
Set of TV, the one you take to bed with you.